Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Cal's Corner here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And the executive producer of the show is the one and only legendary, in my opinion, Mr. Rob McConnell. I'd like to again welcome everyone back to the show. I apologize once again for not being available recently, but I've been very swamped and have been traveling, and it's good to be back, and hopefully that'll continue for foreseeable future. All right, so let's get caught up on a lot of events that have happened over the last couple of weeks. I hope everyone had a very good New Year's and Christmas. I certainly did. Wonderful, in fact. Couldn't have been better. But if you look at the state of the United States and its political climate, you continue to see, unfortunately, despite another year now, it's 2018, this unfortunate polarization and division between the Democrats and Republicans, and of course the average Americans. And the media is right in there, continuing to stir up a bunch of nonsense. And I'm referring to the left-wing liberal media as epitomized by popular networks like CNN and other publications, and even the New York Times. Now, let's be honest. These networks not only, and news entities, not only hate current President Donald Trump, they were all in the tank for Hillary Clinton during the election. And while some supporters of Hillary might say, well, that's not fair, that's not true, people who deny this reality have serious objective problems. We now know that former head of the Democratic National Party, Donna Brazile, she was busted and had to resign from CNN as an advisor because she was leaking questions in advance to the Hillary Clinton campaign. That's not only an ethical violation, it's a violation of election laws. She did it, but was she prosecuted for it? No. Instead, she was appointed as the head of the Democratic National Party because she had to replace Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who resigned in disgrace over the fact that she cut a secret and arguably illegal deal with the Clinton campaign to rig the election and the Democratic primaries so that Hillary Clinton would win. Now, I want to mention this because this fact, which is beyond dispute, arguably solves a key dynamic and so-called mystery that, in my opinion, explains why it is, very likely explains, why Hillary Clinton decided deliberately to set up a private email server. Now, I know about this because I have a book on Hillary Clinton that exposes her lies about why she lost the election to Donald Trump. But let's go back and briefly recap what happened with the server and separate fact from fiction, because, again, the TV networks that are pro-Democrat, anti-Trump, and pro-Clinton, and were in the tank for the Clintons, continue to lie to the world about what really happened. Now, if we take or set aside the fact that Hillary Clinton has constantly changed her so-called explanations as to why she used a private email server, if we were to boil down her rationalization and spin of this, and Hillary Clinton supporters will say, and I know this because I've talked to several of them directly about this issue, they will say, well, it's no big deal because previous Secretary of States had used private email. There's no scandal here. Now, to say that is dishonest and disingenuous, and it's not factually correct. In fact, depending on who's saying it, it's an outright lie. And let me prove it. You have previous Secretary of States who absolutely did use private email on occasion. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell would be one of them. He used America Online. But there is a huge difference between someone who decides to use a private existing commercial email service like Yahoo, Gmail, Microsoft Network, or what used to be, or Yahoo. There is a difference between those services versus somebody who makes a point to set up a private email server, the very dynamics of which, meaning the moment you do that, whatever is on that server is not going to be available when government records are later searched, because it's not part of the government system. Now, the Federal Records Act, prior to Clinton becoming the Secretary of State, clearly states that all correspondence regarding the official duties of government personnel has to be preserved and kept and stored within the government's system. That is beyond dispute. And yet Hillary Clinton violated the Federal Records Act when she made a point to go ahead and set up a private email server, the existence of which we wouldn't even know about had it not been for various lawsuits. Now, these are lawsuits using the Freedom of Information Act because the Obama administration, despite its lies that it was the most transparent administration in history, holds the record for violating laws concerning the Freedom of Information Act. There are many reports, including those by the Inspector General, who has slammed the Obama administration for not only delaying FOIA requests, but outright lying about them or ignoring them or making sure that they were not responded to in time as demanded under the law. Now, was anybody held accountable for this fact in the Obama administration? Was anybody prosecuted for violating these laws, since this was not a coincidence that they were violated? The answer, of course, is no. What passed then for the so-called Justice Department under the Obama administration was often pure hypocrisy. And the things and crimes that former Attorney General Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch let people get away with are and remain inexcusable, and we're still paying the price for it. And we'll talk about that on another show. So once again, don't let people lie to you and fool you by saying, oh, Clinton didn't do anything wrong because other people did it. Well, first of all, that very premise is wrong. If someone robs a bank, that doesn't mean it's right. And to say, well, other people rob banks doesn't automatically make that crime right. So what distinguishes Clinton from all other previous Secretary of States and other politicians is that she set up a private email server, or actually started using a private email server that was already being used by her husband, former President Bill Clinton. Now, again, there is a difference between setting up a private email server versus using a service like Yahoo or Gmail. And one key reason behind that is because those companies have agreements with the United States that if the government or law enforcement or the intelligence community ever wants those records, Yahoo will give them to anybody who requests them that they have the agreements with. There are warrants that can be issued to get those records. But if you have a private email server, all of a sudden that's a very different game. Now, why would Hillary Clinton do this? Well, I think a case can now be made that the reason the Clintons set up a private email server for Hillary stuff is because they wanted to hide their dirty tricks and illegal violations of the election laws when they cut that deal with the Democratic National Party. The short version of which is this: in exchange for getting the nomination by the Democrats, for being given hundreds of superdelegates ahead of time, creating a lead that cannot be surmounted by any candidate, even Bernie Sanders. This would essentially hand the Democratic nomination to the Clintons. The Clintons agreed to basically bankroll the Democratic Party. They loaned tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to the Democratic Party because it was broke, and essentially Debbie Wasserman Schultz was also promised a plush cabinet position. She was offered Secretary of Education should Hillary win the White House. And of course, it was not a coincidence that Wasserman Schultz had to resign, and she had to do it, ironically, just right before their nomination at their convention, which crowned Queen Hillary as their nominee. So that, of course, is the skullduggery, if you will, that the Clintons engaged in regarding the election. The Clintons, of course, continue to deny that they did anything wrong. They always do that. And when they do admit that they are guilty, they always try to say, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. But history has proven that they have a chronic problem with telling the truth. And, of course, the media has yet to come clean with their own involvement in trying to rig things and be in the tank for the Democrats. And there are many studies out there, by the way, you can easily Google them, which prove that most of the media tend to lean liberal. In fact, a survey which was done years ago of the media, specifically in Washington, D.C., which is where all the political action usually tends to happen, at least the serious stuff, about 92% of the media identified themselves as liberals, not conservatives. Now, I want you to be clear regarding my own views. I don't endorse being a liberal, and I certainly don't endorse being a conservative. In my opinion, conservatives are extremists and liberals are extremists. I think that they're opposite ends of the spectrum. I think that's kind of obvious. And I believe that the truth usually is somewhere in between. Now, this does not mean that I advocate that one should be a moderate or a centrist. I think it depends on the issue. Some issues are very black and white. For example, a country must have a strong national defense. There's no question about that. So if I say a country must have the right and the means to defend itself, does that make me a centrist? Does that make me a liberal? Does that make me a progressive? No, I think that makes me someone who's logical. Why wouldn't a country have the right or want the right or insist on the right to credibly or capably defend itself? It's only common sense. Now, I've always said for years that America is a divided country, that we are more the disunited States of America than the United States of America, which is unfortunate, and we'll continue to talk about that in a moment after the break.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Gwilda Wiyaka's latest book, The Science of Magic, Book of Mysteries, Volume 1, is the first book in a series based on her writings that open every episode of the Science of Magic radio show. Drawing on the subject matter of each guest, and armed with over 40 years' experience in shamanism, 35 years in alternative health, and degrees in psychology and religious studies, Gwilda introduces relevant and leading-edge information that supports spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Rich with wisdom and inspirational quotes packaged in digestible segments, this is a book that will pull you from cover to cover. It will also serve as a daily inspirational reading for years to come. The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1 is available at our website, tsompublications.com, amazon.com, and wherever fine books are sold. Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X-Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X-Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk.
Welcome back to segment 2 of Cal's Corner here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show, once again, is Mr. Rob McConnell. Now, as I've said before many times, both in writings and whenever I've done shows like this, the United States of America is a divided country. And that really hurts. I mean, I'm American, born and raised here. And this polarization has got to stop. I do understand that the most important issues in life tend to be binary. Either they're true, false, right or wrong, black or white, etc. I understand that. I accept it. I've even championed it. I've argued that point forever, it seems. But the political polarization that is happening and is getting worse, despite some very good progress on several different fronts, if this doesn't change, it's going to hurt the country even more. Right now, whether you want to give him credit or not, all statistics point to the fact that the economy of the United States is basically on fire. When I say it's on fire, I mean it is sizzling. It is improving, okay? The latest estimate today that came out a few hours ago estimates a GDP growth of 4%. We never achieved 4% under Obama. In fact, Obama's average was barely 2%. So what you have as a typical example of this polarization is when people say, oh, Trump's doing a good job with the economy. Look at all the jobs that have been created. The number of people on welfare has dropped by 2 million. The levels of unemployment for black people has now hit a record low in modern times. They'll say, well, that's because of all the stuff his predecessor did. In other words, it's not Trump's doing, it's Obama's doing. And yet those same people would, in the past, have said when the economy wasn't doing well under Obama, they'll say, well, that's not Obama's fault, it was Bush's fault. Again, you have a selective choice of data here, a bias which is inexcusable. Now, it is obvious common sense that whenever you have a new president, that there is momentum from the previous administration that does carry over into the new one. Therefore, a president can't, 1 week into his job after being sworn in the Oval Office, say, well, the economy has gone up, it has improved, therefore I did it, my first week in office. Of course, you can't say that. But it has been almost 1 year now. You can't say that what has gone on economically is because of Obama. You can't do that. In fact, we're now far enough along in the Trump administration where you have to say, whether you like him or not, agree with him or not, disagree with, what he says and how he does embarrass himself and the country, it does happen. We'll talk about that in a moment. You have to give him his due, meaning some of the stuff that he has been doing with the Republicans, and I am not a Republican. I've never voted Republican. As a rule, I don't support the Republicans. You'll find that, they're doing some things which business likes. Tax cuts, for example. Most people love tax cuts. That's pretty much almost everybody. And it's, of course, an open secret. It's common sense that, of course, most of the tax breaks have gone to the wealthy. That historically has been the case for many years now. That doesn't make it right. But when enough people believe that these tax cuts or these foreign policy initiatives or these economic initiatives are in their best interests, of course they're going to feel better about the economy, and that does tend to reverberate throughout the nation. We now have companies that, for the first time in many years, started giving bonuses. And to show you how polarized and biased this situation has become, there's the issue of Trump's approval ratings. Now, Jake Tapper of CNN is a prime example. He hates President Trump. I think it's safe to say that. And if you look at the recent on-air fight that he got on his show with one of Trump's recent advisors, Tapper made a false statement, which even CNN's own coverage of Trump's ratings didn't support. He said that Trump's approval ratings, hover around 30%. And that's not true. In fact, if you check the latest data from Gallup, which is a polling source that all sides usually consider to be credible, it shows that the approval rating is around 40%. And while that's still low, and that means most Americans are not happy with Trump's performance, 40% is not 30%. It's not around 30%. It isn't even in the 30s. And it's hard to believe that Tapper doesn't know this. In fact, I would encourage you to Google CNN's coverage of Trump's approval rating, and you'll see a clear pattern there that I think stands out, that they're always trying to downplay the numbers and try to stress how bad and dismal it is. And it's really sad, because what they should be doing instead is reporting the truth and say, here's his job approval rating or disapproval rating, depending on how you want to view it, and not put their own spin on things. Tapper also attacked the aide to President Trump, saying, of course, you're here to try to promote, him and try to make him look good. Well, what do you think an aide to a president's going to do? You think he's going to go up there and try to bash him? That's not his job. So I found the segment when I watched it as a fellow journalist to be rather offensive, because it was so obvious to me, and many people seem to agree with this point, that CNN is biased against Trump, and they shouldn't be biased against anybody. They should be stuck reporting the truth. But they don't do that. In fact, one tactic that I have seen in the mainstream, what I call the lamestream media in America, is they either lie about something, they don't report something accurately, or worse, what they do is they show their bias by their refusal to cover certain issues. Let me give you an example here. We now know, again, thanks to lawsuits, not the Clinton campaign or the Democratic National Party, that the former aide, or current aide, she's still employed by the Clintons, it seems, Huma Abedin, you must remember that she denied under oath moving any documents on her now imprisoned husband, our former husband, Anthony Weiner. He's now serving a prison time for sexting and texting an underage female. There were thousands of her emails found on his laptop, as you may recall. The FBI, because they discovered this, was forced to go through the emails. What happened is Huma said under oath, I don't know how they got there. I didn't do it. Well, we now know that she did do it. And we know this because there was a large article in the British press that exposed this. You didn't see this as a page one story on MSNBC. It wasn't a page one story on CNN. It wasn't a page one story on the New York Times. Again, the pattern here is that whenever something comes out that exposes or nails the Democrats or the Clintons, it's just not dealt with the same type of anger and fury that would have been there had the same issue concerned the Republicans or Donald Trump. And that, again, is the problem I have with much of the media in America, and having lived outside the United States for what was going on 18 years, I could see over time this bias emerging. It was very obvious viewing it from outside the country, and I was even asked about it by many friends and colleagues in the countries that I was in. I have been in 27 countries so far, and I would be asked about this all the time, especially because I'm a member of the media, officially accredited, and I have thousands of articles in my portfolio over the years. And I do understand the issues. I have books about them. I talk about them. I comment on them. I write about them. Those articles get published. The reaction to them tends to be far more positive than negative. And I'll just give you one example. One time I remember I had published in a newspaper called the Daily Post a negative review of Microsoft Windows 10, because I also did technology articles as well. I am an IT expert. And so what happens, I got a phone call from the public relations agency that served Microsoft in India, and they wanted a meeting. They said they wanted to discuss my article. I said, sure, come on down to the newspaper. So they come down to the Daily Post newspaper in Chandigarh in India, and I asked them in the meeting, there were two people from that agency, including the owner. I said, well, what are we here to discuss? Was there something wrong in the article? The PR agency admitted to me that no, there was nothing wrong in the article, that they agreed with what I had said. And the short version of what I had said is that Windows 10 wasn't quite ready for prime time, and that it had features that were being advertised and pushed and promoted by Microsoft that would not even be fully functional until a update was released a year later. And that Microsoft says the update is free, but it wasn't really free, because later, within a year roughly, it would start to deactivate features unless you paid that company an upgrade. And that compared to the iOS platform by Apple, there was no contest. Apple was doing things on an iPhone that Windows 10 had yet to do. And I basically said that this was a disaster. So the PR company agreed that everything I'd written in the article was accurate. So I asked them, I said, why are we meeting? What's there to discuss then? And what they wanted to do instead was see if we could work together with the newspaper to go ahead and do Windows events and promote the Windows platform. And I told them point blank, I said, I'm not the right guy to do this because I don't believe in the platform. And I said, if you look at the Microsoft store in the Elante Mall there, it's the only store that doesn't seem to have customers. And that store closed many months ago. Windows is dead as far as a phone platform. Microsoft has pulled out and has discontinued the Windows Phone. And now it's basically a two-platform phone competition between Android by Google and, of course, Apple and their iOS platform.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome to segment 3 of Cal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. So, back to the issue of media bias. Having lived outside the United States for almost 2 decades, I can clearly see over that time that my fellow journalists have gone from being largely objective in covering issues to being very biased and polarized. And probably the greatest example of this is the presidential election, when the unanimous consent by the so-called experts, and I don't profess to be an expert on this subject, predicted that Hillary Clinton would win the White House. Well, I was one of the few journalists who warned people that Trump was going to win, because that's what I kept hearing when I spoke to fellow Americans who have grown tired of the two-party system. And you might say, well, that doesn't make any sense because Trump's a Republican. Well, he ran as a Republican nominee. That doesn't mean he's a hardcore Republican. In fact, Trump didn't want to run as a Democrat, so he chose a Republican Party. But Trump represents to them, right or wrong, true or false, a break from the two-party system in that he's a political neophyte and outsider. He funded his own campaign largely, and he didn't owe anybody any huge favors, not the way that Hillary Clinton would, or a typical politician who rises to the level of the elite political circles that most candidates do who run for Senate or Congress or absolutely the White House. So the so-called Trump revolution was basically just enough Americans, slightly less than half of them, who were saying, look, we need to try something very different. Our system is broken. And while people will say, well, Hillary Clinton got the popular vote, which is true, that's not really as important as many people think. It's something that the Hillary supporters like to stress and the la liberal media likes to talk about. But the fact is, if you take out the votes from California and New York, you'll find that Donald Trump pretty much creamed Hillary across all the demographic areas. And you must remember that he was the first presidential candidate, for better or for worse, who was able to flip the so-called blue wall states that Hillary Clinton was counting on, states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. He was able to flip several of those states. And because they backed him instead of Hillary, Hillary lost the White House. And you can easily see on YouTube, I would encourage anyone doubting this to check it out. You can easily find many, many videos that reflect back on the coverage of that election night. And you will see just how the media melted down and just was shocked that Trump had won. So now we know that Huma Abedin is guilty. It's interesting that the FBI, or Justice Department again, is looking into that issue. And because it's a different administration now, there is a possibility, not a certainty, but a possibility that there may be some eventual prosecution out of this and a reversal of some of these earlier ridiculous verdicts that there was nothing to see here and nothing worth prosecuting. You must remember that former FBI Director James Comey had said that he couldn't recommend prosecuting Hillary nor Huma and others because he couldn't establish intent. Well, the law regarding the mishandling of government records does not require intent. You can look it up. So Comey's claim was ridiculous, and the FBI agent that edited Comey's final statement, he's also been under investigation has been recused from his involvement in the current probe that former FBI Director Robert Mueller has been engaged in regarding Trump and any possible collusion with the Russians. So what you have here in a short version is a nest of vipers, and you have people who have had mixed records regarding their integrity, their bias. It's one thing for Robert Mueller to go ahead and indict some people over money laundering, and yes, he should do that. But let's be honest, Mueller knew where those bodies were buried because both he, Eric Holder, James Comey and even Loretta Lynch had cut deals with even Russian mafia figures when it was convenient to do so, to look the other way while laundering was going on. And yes, some of that laundering did involve Trump's associates. The question now remains, what did Donald Trump know? And Mueller will talk to Trump sometime in the next couple of weeks, and we'll take it from there. But this idea that these investigators are white knights that ride in there and that they're not tainted, that they're sweet and innocent, that they're pure and have nothing but complete wholesome integrity, that has never been true. And there are plenty of examples throughout history to prove that. Let me give you just one of the latest examples that has become public. It turns out that thanks to the declassification of files regarding the Kennedy assassination, now, we must remember that even people who loved John Kennedy have a hard time justifying the fact that he tried to work with the mafia, he and his brother Robert Kennedy, who was the attorney general back then, to try to kill former communist Cuba dictator Fidel Castro. Well, we now know that out of the Middle East, in the small country of Jordan, who the United States wanted to be an ally in the Middle East, other that they could count on, other than a country like Israel, we now know that the CIA supplied women to King Hussein, who was the ruler of Jordan at the time. And what they did is they hooked up a date with former Hollywood actress Susan Cabot with King Hussein. The two hit it off so well that Hussein ended up paying her about $1,500 a month as a support stipend because she later fathered a son. Hussein was likely the father, and unfortunately she was murdered by her own child. She was beaten to death with a weightlifting bar. Now, it turns out that Robert Mayhew, who was the fixer for Howard Hughes, the former eccentric billionaire, he was the one who was tasked as being the liaison to make this work, and this had the approval of the Kennedy administration. Now, Robert Mayhew is an interesting figure because the Kennedy brothers, when they decided to try to kill Castro and use the mafia to get it done, they'd offered the mafia over $100,000 to do it. The mafia turned down that money. They said they'd do it for free. Robert Mayhew was the fixer who contacted Johnny Roselli and some of the other mob figures to try to make that happen. So again, this is another example of the United States government going ahead and breaking the laws. And if you or I tried to do some of this stuff, we'd be in prison. When the CIA does it and the White House says it's okay, no problem, no harm, no foul, right? We must remember that the famed defector, the former Russian colonel, Yuri Nasenko, when he defected to the United States and tried to tell the CIA for years, even though he was being tortured by Robert Kennedy, because he was not believed initially until 3 years of torture finally convinced the CIA that he was telling the truth all along. Nosenko was an important defector because he personally handled the file of Lee Harvey Oswald when he had defected to Russia. Nosenko tried to tell the CIA that there was no Russian conspiracy nor involvement to kill Kennedy. Again, because Robert Kennedy didn't believe him at first, and neither did the CIA, he was kept and tortured for 3 years. They finally agreed that he was telling the truth. When the CIA asked Nosenko what they could do to make up for this abuse and inhumane treatment and illegal treatment that he had been subjected to, his teeth had fallen out, for example, by this time, he wanted to be with women. So the CIA gave him prostitutes, even though prostitution is illegal in Washington, D.C., and in many states in the country, except Nevada. And yet the CIA did it. They did it with the approval of the White House and, of course, the CIA directors. But yet if you or I tried to do that, we'd be in prison. So again, there's a double standard here. And in my own study of U.S. history and intelligence matters, it's quite obvious that the government does break the law when it ever feels it needs to or should, and other times it just doesn't care. And it has one standard, and yet it tries to hold the public to another standard. We know that the CIA has been involved in drug dealing, in money laundering. We even know from the former bank scandals that occurred over the years in the Middle East that it was even using banks that it knew were breaking the law as a cover and a cash source for funding covert operations. So whenever you have any country that has a set of laws on the books and a constitution and a system that is putting people in prison for breaking those laws, and there are valid reasons for doing it depending on what the law is, but at the same time it's also committing some of the same crimes, it's a matter of time before that system implodes or creates a problem for itself. And we have to remember that, again, there are countless examples of this. If you look at the former dictator of Panama, Noriega, President Bush, the first President Bush, George H.W. Bush, he went after Noriega, got him, put him in prison for drug dealing. And yet, when Bush was vice president under President Reagan, the CIA was involved in drug dealing with the Contras, because as long as they were fighting the communists in Nicaragua, we didn't care that they were drug dealing. We didn't care that they were smuggling drugs into the U.S. with CIA approval looking the other way. And yet people who would use those drugs and sell them on the market would be thrown in prison, even though they ultimately hit American streets and got into the markets of America, courtesy of help and collusion by the United States government itself, and yes, even the Department of so-called Justice. Now, if that isn't hypocrisy, nothing is. So those files are now available regarding King Hussein. They are part of a batch of thousands of files that have been released under the orders of President Trump. And to be honest, they should never have been classified. The knowledge that the Kennedys conspired with the CIA and Mafia to try to kill Castro came out in the 1970s. There was no reason decades later for that information to remain classified as it has, but at least it has now come out in the public, and it's rather fascinating reading. And now historians will have to revise their records because the real truth has come out. All right, we'll be back for our final segment here on Kal's Corner.
Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X-Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com. The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show, once again, is Mr. Rob McConnell. Now, we've been all over the map as far as different subjects we've covered in this show. One of the things I like about doing this show is that we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. So let's wrap this up and segue now to some of the recent events that have happened in the last couple of days, and we'll explain why they're connected. Not the politics and paranormal part, but at least this issue of polarization and the bias in the media and the hypocrisy and all that other stuff we've been talking about. Let's talk about the Golden Globes Awards, and let's talk about the buzz from the left-wing liberal media that Oprah Winfrey may run for president and have Hillary Clinton as a supposed advisor. Now, before you start accusing me of saying, well, here he goes about Hillary Clinton again, the issue has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. It has to do with, again, the stupidity driving such coverage. You know, let's be honest. The elite of Hollywood, they don't live in the real world. They don't shop every day in stores like you and I do. They don't live paycheck to paycheck. They live in a different world. Let's be polite. Let's not be blunt about that more than we need to be. So here, many of these celebrities, they were wearing black dresses, black outfits to show solidarity, quote unquote, and try to keep the issue of the recent numerous instances of sexual harassment that have gone on for decades in Hollywood. And of course, sexual harassment is a problem that is worldwide. It's not confined only to Hollywood. And while this does not excuse what Hollywood has been doing, you cannot ignore, if you think objective about this issue, about the brazen hypocrisy that these celebrities exhibit. But yet, where is the media calling them out on it? Nowhere. Even Jake Tapper isn't doing it. So CNN and the mainstream media have failed the world and the public when they can sit there and give someone like Meryl Streep an interview where she talks about how, sexual harassment is wrong and this discrimination against women is wrong and all this other stuff. And she's right about that. But if I were to interview Meryl Streep, I would say, well, how can you, of all people, even talk about this issue when you endorsed and praised and bent over backwards to laud a criminal like Roman Polanski, who was guilty of drugging teenagers, young girls who were 12 or 13, and then he had to escape. He didn't have to, he chose to, and became a fugitive, wanted by law enforcement over his crimes. How can you sit there and praise a guy like that, or call other sexual predators like Harvey Weinstein God, and work with them when you knew this was going on and there's no question it happened? Now, I think the hypocrisy and the dynamics of that and the logic are beyond obvious. So where was the media individually identifying all the celebrities and their hypocrisy on this issue? They were nowhere largely. Instead, it was kissy-kissy powder puff coverage showing, oh, look at this beautiful dress. It's black. The reason it's black in color is because of yada, yada, yada. They totally ignored this issue. And you may remember a year earlier, after Trump won the election, that Meryl Streep gave that what I call crocodile tears speech, where she talked about how bad it was that he had won. And of course the media covered that and put that on the front page and bent over backwards to give that all the sunshine they could. So I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong. It wouldn't be the first time, but in my opinion, when you have this type of brazen hypocrisy you need to expose it. Otherwise, it's going to get worse. So, as the New York Post points out in their latest issue, does America really need another celebrity president? That's really not the issue. The issue is, does America need another president who's not going to do the job or isn't doing the job that must be done? The answer, of course, is absolutely not. Now, you can be a celebrity, you can be someone who's unknown, doesn't matter. What does matter is that you do the right job and that you're the right person for that job and that you get the job done. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, because the color of your skin does not determine your intelligence. Genetics does. But when you have a two-party system that is so polarized that one side won't support the other, even when they're right, people who hold those opinions and sit in office have been elected by the people, to serve the nation, to put their own preferences aside and do what's right for the country. When people don't focus on why they're in that power position to begin with and they don't do the right things, they're not worthy of being in office and they need to be drummed out of there. And this is the problem that I see that the United States has. And it's not just America. You see it in Europe. Okay? Look at Germany right now. Angela Merkel, even though she won re-election for a record-tying fourth term in office, she has to start over again because she's not able to form a government. She's not able to form a government because it's her fault. She can't do it. She's lost enough support because people are tired of her policies. She's not acting in ways that most Germans feel are in the best interests of their nation. Therefore, she's having a hard time putting together a coalition that's going to work. And as a result of that, you have across Europe the rise of the far right or extremist parties, because historically this is what happens when mainstream parties fail their voters and their citizens. People look to extremists or unconventional solutions saying, hey, we've got nothing to lose, we might as well try this. And that dynamic not only exists around the world, it's arguably universal. It even happened in this last election with Donald Trump. You know, when Trump ran for president, the Republicans blew him off. You can Google so-called self-proclaimed experts like Rachel Maddow of MSNBC, where she's saying he's not going to run for president. And if he were, he's not going to win a single primary contest. Well, Trump ran against over 20 people. He beat them all handily by a margin of better than 2-1. You have to give him his due on it. Doesn't matter who the person is. Remember his closest challenger, Ted Cruz, got barely half the delegates that Trump did. Trump beat them all. And we now know, thanks to WikiLeaks, not because of the transparency of the Democratic National Party, that ironically it was the Hillary Clinton campaign in what was a stupid move. They were encouraging, through mutual contacts and stroking Trump's ego and saying, yeah, please run, you'll make a great president, you know. Well, they wanted Trump to run because Hillary thought, well, my opponent couldn't be easier to beat. Hillary didn't want a fair fight. That's why the election was rigged. And she loved the idea of Donald Trump running because the arrogance and ego inherent in her and fellow Democrats was Trump can't win. This is the best candidate you can have because it'll just be a landslide. Well, it wasn't a landslide. Trump pulled off what the so-called experts consider to be a historic upset. And again, you can easily watch on YouTube many videos of the media melting down after Trump won. And they're hysteric to watch because the signs were always there that the mood of the nation wasn't going to allow or accept Hillary Clinton as president. And if you take Donald Trump out of the race, you can tell that the mood was there by looking at the campaign of Hillary's rival, Senator Bernie Sanders. You must remember that almost 100% of the money that he used to run his campaign on came from small individual donors. He didn't take huge multi-million-dollar payments from Wall Street or corporate vested interests. His was a groundswell, ground-based public uprising And that should have been a large signal or shot across the bow of the Hillary Clinton campaign and the mainstream media. Instead, the mainstream media colluded with the leadership of the Democratic Party and the Clintons to basically downplay his candidacy, to discredit him, to describe him as some sort of out of touch with reality socialist, anything they could do to throw dirt and mud on him and smear him. And while they were focused on trying to destroy Sanders, and they did, in the eyes of many people, they, of course, didn't even pay attention to Trump. And then, of course, Trump ended up the victor. So the signs were always there that there was going to be an upset, because people have risen up and used their votes to say, we need to try something different. Now, the danger of this something different failing is that it may cause people to become even more extreme in the next elections going forward, or what might happen is people may become increasingly disillusioned with the American system and democracy itself and look to embrace other forms of government, which is not the smart thing to do. One of the most disturbing trends that I have seen in so-called millennials, these are young people who were born again around the millennium, record numbers of them like to embrace socialism. That's how ignorant and naive they are, because history has proven again and again and again, undeniably, that socialism doesn't work. And anybody who thinks that socialism or communism works, I would encourage them to move to North Korea, to Cuba, or go live in Venezuela. If you love socialism so much, go join the economic mess that it has caused in those countries. So, again, the answer to all of this, as far as solving these problems, is to call a spade, so to speak. Don't play the games of being politically correct. Don't mince words. Be blunt. If it's right, it's right. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And thankfully, most of the important issues in life are binary. You're either alive or you're not. You're either a male or a female. You either have blue eyes or you don't. Now, again, those are simple examples, but look around you, folks. Again, most of the issues that are important in life are binary.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.